A decentralized autonomous organization has raised almost $4 million with the aims to decentralize drug discovery. Joining us now to discuss is LabDAO co-founder Niklas Rindtorff. Niklas, good morning.
Good morning. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So why don't you start off by laying the foundation for us? Your aim is to decentralize drug discovery. Why do we need to do that? What solution is this going to present for scientists who work in this realm?
Yeah, I think it might be good to take a bit of a step back before we go into talking about decentralizing drug discovery, and first say, okay, what was the initial motivation for this whole space, which is called decentralized science, which is to decentralize the way that scientists work together. And it really is based on some of the key insights that, one, most of scientific work today is based on producing some type of digital data. So that can be genomics data, that can be protein structure data, or any type of data that is produced within a scientific research project. And eventually, these types of data lead to intellectual property, and that is what is protected by the U.S. Patent Office and by other patent offices, and eventually is sort of the founding building block for a lot of biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies. And then I think that the third piece, next to it being data being massively produced within research, and then intellectual property being as one of the cornerstones of drug discovery, is the idea of shared ownership and how can we use DAOs to restructure ownership. And this is really what we've been focusing on. So creating a place where scientists can generate data, they have the tools to produce it and to modify it, and then we also enable them to track the ownership of the data. And through that, the big ambition is that scientists will be able to do projects that are highly translational and eventually, could lead to products that can be valuable within the biotech and pharmaceutical industry. That said, there's still a lot of way to go for what we're doing.
Are there a lot of scientists who want this? Tell us about the reception. Who's involved in the DAO? It feels like, when we think about scientists, they have been working one way for a really long time. And this is a really different way, I can imagine, for scientists to operate.
Absolutely. So we came together about a year ago. I'm a physician scientist by training. I've been working both in Europe and on the East Coast, trained in biomedical informatics. So actually, most of my work was really always digital. And the scientists that are working with us, they're part of our community, they're used to spending most of their day in front of a laptop analyzing biological data themselves. And so in terms of, how does the everyday work change, it's actually not that different. It's, we're using a Discord instead of a Slack. And the payment and sort of HR system, it looks a bit different. But beyond that, things are actually overall pretty similar. So we're a distributed team, and scientists, can work no matter where they are from.
Is there a role for AI in all this?
Yeah, there is for sure. So what we announced next to our fundraise is a tool called PLEX. So PLEX is our first client for the Lab Exchange. And at the core insight for us was, well, if scientists want to work together and they want to create together online, what's really key is that they have a platform where they can share services and they can share tools. Science is a team sport. An NFT artist can produce a collection by themselves or in a very small team, but if you want to do large discoveries, work on large projects, you need to have a way in which you can find collaborators and share resources. And what we discovered really early on was one of the first bottlenecks that people encounter is access to high-performance compute. So when I run a machine learning model and I use it to, for example, predict one protein structure, I can do that on a laptop. But when I want to run really big models, or when I want to run one model 1,000 times, it starts to get a bit tricky. And what PLEX enables is to run these types of compute workloads, so machine learning models, AI models, at scale, as easy as I think it can reasonably be on a decentralized compute network.
You mentioned NFTs there. I know there's an element here where scientists can use NFTs to prove ownership of their data. Kind of talk us through that process and how that I guess, disrupts the process the scientists use now?
Yeah, so we could actually stay at this example of PLEX, this idea that scientists can trade computational services and they can run their computational workloads on a distributed network. So when very practically, let's say we want to, for example, fold a protein. Perhaps some of the viewers have heard about AlphaFold, this idea that we now have a machine learning model that was developed by Google DeepMind that allows you to take any protein sequence, so the way that a protein, which is a building block of our body and extremely relevant to drug discovery as a concept, is structured and can actually predict the 3D position of those atoms. Now, that itself is the computational tool that we're running on PLEX, and the input data, and especially also the output data itself, are minted as NFTs every time a scientist is using PLEX. And we primarily care about this because it creates a reproducibility. There's no better way for reproducibility than this idea of if it's not your key, it's not your coin. If it's not on chain, it's hard to reproduce where your data was generated from. But also, as sort of a side effect, it creates proof of ownership. It's very clear which scientist ran that analysis, and when it comes to the point where that structure might lead to a therapeutic, it will be very clear to trace back who was contributing to that discovery.
Niklas, thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was LabDAO co-founder Niklas Rindtorff.